All right, everyone. Welcome to Mena's Live, a Mena's Live book review. I'm, of course, Mena's. Joining me is the author of 12 Summers and good mate of mine, Adam Zwar. Adam, how are you?
Good manners. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. Like all my fucking guests on the show, we're a bit late, but that's all right. We made it live. I hope there's a few people watching. So I've got your book here, 12 Summers by Adam Zwar. Excellent, excellent. And if you notice, I strategically put it in front of a Gideon Hay book, so I look intelligent.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
love the book. Love the book.
Thank you,
Look,
mate.
it's a beautiful journey through not only your sort of cricket viewing in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, but then your personal stories. Tell me, what sort of story did you want to tell?
I at first I thought it was mainly going to be my personal story, with a bit of cricket put in, and when the publishers read it like that, you had to deliver it in thirds, and when they read the first third, they go, "Hey, we really like the cricket stuff. More of that." That was the only
Mm,
note that came back to me, and I went, "Oh,
yeah.
okay." And so it eventually became half and half, and
Less stuff
then
about
I,
cancer, more about cricket. Was that the
yeah,
theme?
yes, that's right. Less stuff about boarding
More
school, probably.
prostitutes?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, the viewers are getting a good understanding. So, so what? What ended up happening is I read Fever Pitch many years ago, Nick Hornby's Fever Pitch, which is like a fan's look at following Arsenal over a lifetime, and suddenly that sanctioned for me what I could do with cricket. I went, oh, well, these feelings that I'm having and this emotional response that I have to the game is actually is a genre in itself, and and so it's a different genre to Gideon Haigh, or it's different to Peter Lawler or any of those cricket writers, or Daniel Bredick. It's a more of an emotional kind of look at the game as opposed to a dry um, kind of expert view of the game. Even though
Yeah, it's not.
I,
Yeah, it's not like analysis. It's more like your experiences
mm,
as a fan going through it.
yes,
Uh, so, look, for those of you who are listening or watching who don't know who Adam is, accomplished writer, uh, yeah, former journo, but you've done some stuff in cricket before. You've directed a
mm.
couple of documentaries. What were they called?
So yeah, I produced Underarm, which is the which on Channel 7 and
Another comedy.
TV1 in New Zealand. Yeah, yeah, last year. And before that was Bodyline, which was a kind of a MythBusters almost look at Bodyline, and we were able to get some side-on footage of Larwood in the Adelaide Test, just one over of it from the National Film Archives, and we were able to we're able to kind of do a 3D model of the actual ground, and so the camera was a little bit, so the camera was probably a little bit squarer than mid off, and so they were able to actually move the camera via 3D modeling to so it's actually adjacent to the pitch, and so then they were able to measure Larwood's pace, and just that one over, he was bowling 147, and that was, and we're talking about a guy who's 5'7", 5'8", and he just had these extraordinarily long arms. So we just picked out one over. I mean, I'm sure he bowled faster than that, during that Ashes series in 32, 33. So that was a really interesting thing, and that culminated in me facing Brett Lee without a helmet at the end.
Fascinating. Fascinating that you got that speed, almost 150. That's terrorizing. Can you imagine the Aussie batters back in
Yeah,
those days, no protection, Larwood bowling bounces.
like sticky
So
wickets. It was yeah.
one thing that struck me throughout your book. So you've got a cricket pedigree for those listening. He's also a big fan of Cricket Unfiltered, Adam. So I had to get him on the show when he wrote a cricket
Yes,
book. Um, So, one thing I did sort of glean from the book is, everybody thinks their life is unique, but actually
yes.
mine's not that unique. Like a lot of your experiences watching cricket and your emotions are, very similar to mine and my reactions.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Look, that's great, because that you're the people I'm writing for. You know, it's our generation kind of grew up. I mean, I don't know what your first memory of cricket was, Menace. What was your first? What can you remember about international cricket? What can you remember first?
Well, I can tell you exactly what I remember first. So it was the 88-89 summer in Australia where we got spanked by the Windies. But I timed my run perfectly because that was when I got into cricket. And then obviously it leads into the 89 Ashes. And then it's a rocket ship to the
Yeah,
moon
you're
from
right.
there
You're right.
for the next 16
Yeah, man.
years. It was heaven. Whereas, you
Yeah.
started early 80s. So you suffered.
Yeah.
You suffered, Adam.
Yeah. Yeah, can you imagine it? So, I mean, I came in that first little bit, and Chappell was still captain, and you still had Lillian Marsh, and then we saw Hughes just step in a little bit, and that was watching that unfold. That whole drama was tragic, and anyone who's read Golden Boy knows just how kind of deep that drama went. I mean, Golden Boy is probably one of the great cricket books that I've ever read, and it's if you want to actually see the definition of mental disintegration, possibly read that. And Kim Hughes was the first man I ever saw cry. So then the disintegration of Hughes, then Border takes over, then South Africa Rebel Tour. So the team's decimated. It's literally like a second or even perhaps even a third 11 you're kind of dealing with now. And they're just going around getting flogged. And it wasn't like, and they were dropping so many catches. You're just dropping catches all the time. And then Simpson comes in and he goes, well, the first thing I can do, I can't actually teach you to be like world-class cricketers, but I can teach you to field. And so he taught them to field really well. And by 87 World Cup, it was like they were the best fielding team in the world, even though they weren't that. Probably batting and bowling probably weren't up there at all. In fact, they were like 16s to actually win the World Cup, and that was like a long shot. And have you lost me, mate?
No, I can hear you. Why? Am I frozen? Usual technical dramas.
Oh, you got me back?
Yeah, I got you. I heard the whole thing. I was just so still.
Yeah, right. Well,
I was frozen.
Yeah. You just blacked out. But yeah, 89. So by the time
that was my brain, I just blacked out. When you talked about mid-80s, I just blacked out on purpose. I just kind. So you come into you start supporting Australia in the under summer, but what I loved about the book. We'll get into some details, but I'm a stickler for cricket facts and cricket knowledge, and honestly, and I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass. And I know Stephen Vag, one of our friends, has helped this. The research, the cricket research is impeccable. Obviously, I can't validate all the stories you made up about your personal life, but the cricket stuff, the minute detail, you brought together so many different sources to tell the cricket story. You've kept it contemporary at the time, but then you've gone and found stuff to now where stuff's sort of come out, and you've added that color into retelling the story. So the cricket writing is exceptional. I know it's bloody phenomenal. So, I think if you are a cricket fan, especially, you listen to this podcast and you're a bit younger and you didn't go through it, I think it's a brilliantly captivating, retelling of that period. And it just flows. I don't know. It's sort of like a Bill Bryson book. You just can't stop reading. And I don't even like reading. I just listen to podcasts.
Well, there's an audio book too, versions that you can just kind of hang out and listen to that. But so Stephen Vag I went to school with, and he's obviously a friend of the podcast, and he's a cricket nerd, and I said, can you just I paid him some money, and I said just write down some of your memories from that period, and he did. He sent me a bunch of clippings and things like that, and it kind of just got me thinking. I just needed that little bit of what meant something to him. That wasn't related to the Queensland Sheffield Shield team, which is a miracle, knowing Steve. But then then I wrote the book, and then I paid some money to a guy called Laurie Colliver. If you know him,
Very well. I buy his Cricket Digest every year. He is a
gotcha. Yeah. So he was great for me because he like you know, he would like I actually called it, you know, the Adelaide Oval a couple of times. He goes, mate, Adelaide Oval. No one calls it the Adelaide Oval. And I might have even said rules of cricket once. He goes, laws of cricket, buddy. Laws of cricket. You know, so it was just he was good, and then he would debate just certain moments because he scores every game. He's an absolute nuff.
Yeah.
And I you know, love that.
Absolutely, and I love the way you brought to life the figures of the time, especially Alan Border, Dean Jones, the War Brothers, all those guys, Michael Slater, those real stars of the period. You know, you encapsulate how they loomed over, you know, our lives as fans and as the Australian public. They were so central to the Australian discourse right throughout those periods. You bring them to life, and then I love how you sort of sprinkle in your personal interactions with them in later years.
Yeah. Oh, it was very interesting. But people have remarked on that, you know, just as a fan, how I suddenly kind of came face to face with Border a few times, and how I can, you know, I guess who else? Oh, Michael Holding and people like that. Yeah. So like, I just made myself. I mean, you're the same, man. You know, you just kind of, you're a fan, you're around them, and eventually your paths cross. And with Border, I was just a kid, and he came up to Cairns to run a coaching clinic, and Dad said, "Do you want to go and have a look?" It was only for the elite cricketers. So it was Jimmy Ma. I remember the only guy I knew who was there, and I used to be in Jimmy's side, and I think I say in the book that he and I used to open the batting together, and at lunch he'd be on 100 and I'd be on 3, or crying underneath a tree because I got out. Yeah, and Jimmy was also the person that made it very apparent that I had no future playing international cricket or any sort of representative cricket. It was just like, when you kind of just see greatness at the other end, you really kind of realize where you're at. Like, you know, no, I don't see the ball as early as Jimmy. No, my technique's not as good as Jimmy. And kind of Jimmy was not belittling of me. He was just like kind of perplexed that I couldn't do what he could do.
Yeah, I had a similar moment. No, it's all right. I'm used to the delay in this stream. So look, it's like when I faced Brett Lee. You said you had to face him with a helmet off. I rocked up to training at grade cricket once, and Brett Lee was bowling, and that was the moment I was like, I came out of that net session thinking, I just cannot imagine getting on the front foot and hitting this guy past him for 4. You know, like I could, I could barely survive. So yeah, I empathize with that feeling.
What era was that?
So that was mid-90s. He was about 18. Actually, it was I turned up to grade cricket because I was keen, and it was Jeff Thompson and Brett Lee bowling to me. Now that's a fucking fearsome duo.
Are you kidding me?
No, Jeff Thompson off about.
What was Tomo doing there?
I think he was there to work with Binger, and it was really interesting because everyone talks about Tomo's action, how you can't see the ball, and he was coming off 5 steps and bowling 120 probably, and I still couldn't see the ball because it just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, that's right. That slinging action means you're not seeing it until much later. Yeah, true.
But I liked, your interactions. You talk about them ones when you're kids, and then you obviously working on these documentaries. You've got to them work with them on a professional level, and I really enjoyed that sort of window into that. And I guess again, I had similar kind of experiences. Being around the Australian team in the 90s through a friend, and then interviewing a lot of our heroes. It's a very unique experience because I don't know about you, but there's something different when you come across a childhood hero. You could interview Pat Cummins tomorrow, but if it was someone you looked up to as a kid, those moments must be moments you treasure.
Yeah, well, I interviewed Greg Chappell last week, and that was a big thing for me.
I've already
It really is.
I've already interviewed him, Adam.
Yeah.
And actually,
you're done.
Yeah, he actually, the only thing he didn't want to talk about was the underarm. He said, I answer any question you want, but I'm sick of talking about underarm.
Yeah, he only talks about underarm for money these days.
Exactly. Well,
But well, I think we paid him. We had to pay everyone on the underarm documentary.
It would have been hard for him not to talk about underarm on that documentary. Would have been a bit strange.
No, that's right.
He went on to the underarm documentary. Anything but underarm.
Yeah, you're right. It's an interesting thing. I've got a theory about cricketers because I've hung around a lot with actors and stand-up comics in my life, and I think there's something similar there. There's something that's very solo. They're superstitious. They believe in magical thinking. Even though they're part of a team, it's very an individualistic pursuit.
Selfish.
And there's that anxiety that's there too, you know. So I think we're related in that way.
Yeah, great experience. So yeah, I've got a few notes from the book. Let's go right back. So it starts with a lot about fatherhood, and Desmond's reached out to me and he said he doesn't like the book. Bad news.
No, I bet he doesn't.
So bad luck. But you know, your dad's got a fascinating story. He wrote a book on Hess. What's Rudolf Hess?
Yeah. Rudolf Hess was in Spandau. Rudolf Hess, who was Hitler's deputy, was in Spandau prison in Germany at the time, and it was this massive prison, and it used to contain all the Nazis. You know, so it was a horrible place. But in the end, Hess was the only one left, and of course Hess had this situation where he disobeyed Hitler's orders and flew from Germany to England to allegedly try and end the war. But Churchill took no sympathy on him and threw him in the Tower of London, and eventually found his way to Spandau prison, and where he's the only prisoner there, and so Dad was able to interview him and smuggle questions into him and a tape recorder, and then Hess would speak into the tape recorder, and then the tape would come out, and Dad would transcribe it, and that was how he wrote the book. That's how he wrote the book. And I don't know if anyone remembers the movie Wild Geese 2, but that was based on Dad's book. And so he wrote about Hess, and then he wrote about Peter Thompson, the 5-time British Open winner. He went around the world with Peter Thompson, and this is an interesting thing because ordinary club cricketers will understand this, that when he was on the circuit, Arnold Palmer, Nicholas, Gary Player, Lee Trevino, they would always say, Des, give us a look at your swing. And they would, hit a few balls in front of them, and they'd say, do this, do that. So at the start of the tour, Dad was playing off 14. By the end, he was playing off 21. And the reason for that is that elite sportsmen don't know how to actually coach. Generally speaking, they don't know how to coach just normal people. There's a huge chasm between us. And as I found with Jimmy Ma and myself, it's just like, well, I'm sure that I can write better than Jimmy Ma, but I can't, I just can't see the ball as early as he can. So Dad was good to me, though. He would always bolt, always give me throwdowns in the backyard and everything. He's a natural leg spinner.
Fantastic. And obviously a massive inspiration then for you, studying journalism and then being a writer.
Yeah. Yeah, he was introduced me to comedy too. So he introduced me to all the Barry Humphries records and the Bob Newhart records, and this comedian called Shelley Berman, who was actually I was a big fan of. And if people don't know that name, they remember Curb Your Enthusiasm. He played Larry David's father in that. And so Shelley Berman was a great inspiration as well. So comedy and cricket were my two, because I was an anxious child, comedy and cricket were my two kind of life rafts. Without them, I would have been in all sorts of strife, I reckon. Mental health wise.
Yeah, well, I mean, No comment. There's so many strands to this book, so many, away from cricket. So you talk about sort of your childhood. I mean, you went to boarding school and you sort of go through the wanking police and the child abuse and the bullies, at the boarding school. I mean, such a great window into that period of the 80s. I mean, I obviously went to a similar style school. I wasn't a boarder and there was no wanking police, thank goodness. But so that's sort of beautiful telling of that. And then, moving into, your studies post school and your sort of first bits of journalism. And I heard you on Gerard Whateley's radio show, and you said you started with him at the Herald Sun, but that's impossible because Gerard Whateley's 65. So how did that happen?
I know, mate. He was 65 then. I'm 2 years older than him apparently, and when there was just no doubt that he was the adult in our friendship. He was the one that got the interview with Steven Spielberg. He was he got all the kind of the fancy interviews because he wasn't a sports. That's a cat, by the way. He wasn't a sports guy.
Unless you've got a tail.
Then. I mean, yeah. He was. I knew he was interested in horse racing, but and then this kind of deep knowledge of AFL football revealed itself slowly and surely, and he just kind of the game needed him.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, I'm the only people I'm more kind of starstruck by than cricketers are commentators, and I wanted to be a commentator when I was a child, and now you're living my dream. So
are you a bit nervous about this chat? Because I do grade cricket on a Sunday afternoon.
No, you do Shield. And also, are you ball by ball?
Yeah, ball by ball. But I can do expert as well. So multi-talented.
So did you practice that? How did you come upon that? And how did you actually get yourself match fit?
Well, it's a really good question. What I did was I just walked into the commentary box for the first time and just started commentating on a Shield match.
Yeah.
Because
you just knew what to do.
Yeah, I've listened to cricket for my whole life. It was very natural. But yeah, the first time I ever commentated was a Shield match. Just and I love it. So yeah, I get nervous around commentators as well. But yeah, especially the ones when we were kids, the ones when we were kids, those stars. I was never more nervous than when I called Ian Chappell to interview him for the podcast. I was just petrified.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
was he good?
He was great. He was excellent. But I just knew if I asked him a bloody stupid question, he'd tell me. So I was like, most people are polite, but he will not take any shit.
No, that's right. He'll tell you if he doesn't like you. I mean, I want to do a quiz show where you start an Ian Chappell story and the contestants have to finish it. Because we've all heard all these stories,
Well, look, I've got a few notes. So firstly, we've talked on this podcast a lot about the sort of the pain of the way television was, the way cricket was televised in the 80s. And, reading your account of the 1987 World Cup final with, you could really feel the bitterness in your writing that a World Cup final would not be shown. Instead, they would show a Sunday night movie. I could still feel the bitterness 30 years later. I lost him.
Just lost you there, Menace. That last bit.
Wasn't interesting. We didn't need to relive the 1992 World Cup. I think we could have just left that where it was.
No. You and Ian Healy. Healy didn't even keep his shirt, and he kept every shirt from every tournament he was ever in, except that one.
Not surprised. That was a shocker. I really enjoyed the retelling of Border's retirement, because I remember staying up all night and watching his final innings in South Africa. And I'm sure you must have had a very strong emotional response to that.
Well, I was just desperate for him to keep his average over 50. So I was going, by South Africa. I think he would have to have really bombed out in that series to be below 50. But I was quietly confident by then that that would he'd maintain that. I don't know why. I mean, Border doesn't give a shit about me. I mean, I don't know why I'm just like totally just obsessed that he maintained an average over 50. It was so important to me. But there was this. So I could describe him as the Churchill of Australian cricket. He came to the fore when the country needed him most, and he was there forever. And everyone was nervous about him leaving because the last time we didn't have Border, what were we going to do without Border? I mean, he was the linchpin. And of course, I think Taylor was really good and really solid, and it all worked out well. But you didn't know whether we were going to fall off a cliff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved your little story about meeting him and making him feel very uncomfortable. So I'll leave it for those that want to read the book. But that's very strange.
Sure.
I've met Border a few times. He's the nicest guy. So you must have been bloody weird to freak him out.
Yeah. Well, you know me.
Yeah, definitely. Talking about Dean Jones, I mean, he's such a central figure in so many parts of this book. He was, he was such a star, and then you really can feel the pain of the injustice of his dropping, and I think it still flows on now.
Well, you kind of, because there's not a solid reason for it. You can't say he was out of form. Like, I think 2 tests before that, he scored a century before he got replaced by Damien Martin. I think at the time, the Slackers were obviously just desperate to get Martin in the team one way or another, because he was a boy wonder, because that technique was unparalleled. But
my feeling is it's more a personal issue.
Yeah, but no one will give you a straight answer, really. Have you got a straight answer? Have you got anything particular?
Not that I'm willing to broadcast, Adam.
Yeah, right. Okay. No, it was okay. Well, this is a fan's view of cricket, and as a fan, I did not know what was going on, and I read everything. So the fact that I don't know what was going on means that only the people in the inn knew. So for me, it was just a complete injustice. And as Tim Lane said, there's never, statistically, it was the most confounding decision in the history of Australian cricket, because he was doing so well, and then dropped from the one-day side, a few months later. But they wanted him to stay on, but he went, no, if you're going to drop me, he said to Mark Taylor, are you seriously saying that you're a better one-day player than me? And because I'm out, this is ridiculous. And then, of course, when the Australia 8 concert came up, he said, well, I'm the obvious person. He scored a triple century in Shield that summer, and he said, well, I'm the obvious person to captain this side. And the Australians selector said, no, you're too old. Of course, Merv Hughes got selected, and they're exactly the same age. So many. You poor old Jonesy. I just surmised at the end that they just didn't like the cut of his jib. And also, he was, this was a time when Australian cricket didn't like people who looked like they liked themselves too much. And Jones would have have the zinc on the lips. He was the first person to wear sunglasses. He slid into the boundary ropes. He did all these things and now everyone goes, oh, that's just, normal behavior. But if you turned up in sunglasses to play a test match in the 80s, then everyone thought you're up yourself. Which is bizarre, because you're actually protecting your eyes. It's, you're not trying to look cool. Maybe Jonesy had a slight eye on that, but it's actually protects your eyes. So it was.
Well, history has proven him right. Everyone wears sunglasses.
History's proven 100%, mate, 100%.
Yeah, but I just think you really sort of, expressed the feelings of the fans about his dropping, and it's one of those things that hasn't gone away, and his untimely death has certainly maybe amplified it a bit. The injustice, and then
from a Victorian point of view, Victorians always felt persecuted, by the way.
They still are.
yeah,
Sort of interspersed, so, talk about the wanking police and then your early days as a journo, but then, the intensely personal moments where hear about your mum's cancer diagnosis for the first time
yeah,
as you're about to go off and embark on a new career. And I got to say, you
yeah,
tug on the heartstrings a bit there, Adam. Now, what was it like for you having to go back through those moments in your life?
yeah. For me, people say, "Oh, it must have been painful for you," but no, I found it therapeutic to go back there and just get it out. And so yeah, my mum passing away like in 2001 was one of those, you know, big things because she never got to see me do anything of note really, and she was my biggest supporter. And so without her, the thing was she was everyone's biggest supporter, and she had no interest in cricket, but she used to sit and watch the cricket with me, and she used to make jokes. Would make jokes about Brett Lee. She goes, "It's almost people like almost say that his name as one word, Brett Lee, Brett Lee."
Really?
She goes, "Brett Lee." Yeah, yeah. So she used to make jokes about that, and I think it's interesting that was the kind of person she was. Okay, you're interested in cricket. Well, now I'm going to get interested in cricket as well. And so she was very important to me. And when she passed, that left a huge hole in my life. And yeah, so it was important that I write about those moments because they meant, like, someone's complaint. So there was one reviewer said, "Oh, I love all the cricket stuff, but why do you have to write about boarding school and his mum dying?" And I thought, well, there's no point in me writing the book if I'm not going to write that because they're important moments in my life.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, the beautiful thing for a reader is that it mirrors so much of what we were experiencing. That like
Yeah,
you, with fans of the Australian cricket team, and going around it is these personal things, and you signpost them
yeah.
with moments in the cricket field. Bizarrely, I remember when Matty Hayden scored 380. My wife set our kitchen on fire, and I was sitting in the other room watching Hayden motor towards the world record, and I said to my wife, "I could smell smoke," and she said, "No, there's no smoke." And then an hour later, the fire brigade were there because the kitchen was on fire. And I always remember, that's the day 380 was scored. And then, the day
Of course,
my
mate.
daughter came home from hospital, the day was
Oh,
the magic 4:30 game in South Africa that Australia lost. And I was,
yeah,
watching
yeah,
I was up all night, making sure my baby doesn't suffocate to death, because that's what a new parent's biggest fear is. And at the same
yeah,
time,
yeah,
watching, Australia and South Africa playing the most epic one-day game. So, I think those
yeah.
experiences you have
Oh,
that sort
yeah.
of run along with the cricket are important.
Yeah, that's great that you say that and you put it in those terms because as I say, I knew everything's marked in your life, but a lot of people go, "Oh, I don't remember decades. Well, I don't remember what happened in 1999." Well, we remember what happened in '99 because we're cricket fans. We remember
Mm.
the West Indies tour and War versus Warren, and Warren being dropped, and then we remember the '99 World Cup, which is the greatest. Perhaps contained two of the greatest one-day matches in the history of cricket. So if it's or 2005, who doesn't remember 2000? Well, cricket fan doesn't remember 2005. So it's yeah. So I think being a cricket fan has helped us through life because it's given us signposts.
Definitely. And then there's other great things, like you interviewing rock stars, you're interviewing Sting, driving sex workers around. I mean, you've led a colorful life, Adam.
Yeah, yeah. I've tried a lot of things in my life.
Mm,
I think part of being a writer is you're always fascinated by what's behind the curtain. And I mean, I I could have got a job as a bartender or washing dishes or something when I moved to Melbourne. I didn't have any money in it, and I lived with a woman who was a stripper. We were just friends, and she said, "Are you going to Melbourne? Well, here's the name of the company that I work for. They're a stripping agency, and they sometimes require drivers to drive them around to the different gigs that they go to. So I rang them up, and they really needed money. And I got a job at the Herald Sun, but they weren't paying for another month. So I rang them up, and they said, all the drivers, we're good for drivers to drive strippers, but we need some drivers to drive escorts. And so I became an escort driver, a driver of escorts, and around Melbourne. And I could have, as I said, I could have been washing dishes, and I would have just earned the same amount of money. But I was fascinated in this life. What does a dude who drives escorts do? And it turns out it's pretty dangerous work, because if they don't come out at the right time, you got to go in and get them. And of course, I'm not a fighter, so I had to negotiate my way, to get them to release the woman. So yeah, it was interesting and tough, and I always wondered why I did it. But now I know if I could write a book about it.
Yeah, definitely. And there's so much great stuff in there outside the cricket. You mentioned the 99 tour of the West Indies and then the 99 World Cup. And you bring that to life. And it's amazing how that 99 Windies tour still bubbles away now. And
I know.
Yeah. And the 99 World Cup, obviously, listeners to this show will know that I was at, well, it's good if he's not hearing me. I was at the World Cup in England, so I was at that 120 not out. I was at the semi-final, so obviously they loom large in my life. And
you're at the semi-final.
Yes.
Wow. And so where were you?
And then 2 weeks ago, I interviewed Steve Waugh about it. So happy days.
Oh mate, yeah, I remember that. I saw the photo of you and the great man, you and the Ice
me,
Man.
sucking on his neck. The boldest, you call it the boldest one-day innings in history. Steve Waugh's 120 not out, and it was exceptional. Yeah. And again, you bring that tournament, that 99 World Cup, to life. I said I was there, and you really encapsulate it. And then, so love that retelling of it, and love actually the way you describe Steve Waugh as, when Steve Waugh batted, I felt I wasn't getting a lesson in cricket, but a lesson in life. I mean, that right there is gold. I mean, I think that's the best sentence in your book.
Oh, thanks, mate. Yeah, because sometimes we approach life like we're ducking and weaving, and we're trying not to get, we're trying not to, get hit by the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. But so that was a time where a normal person would have gone in, Australia's backs were to the wall. A normal cricketer would have gone in and gone, I'm just going to see out a couple of overs and just get my eye in and just taking the situation, and hopefully we'll just see what happens. But Waugh coming out, Australia's backs to the wall, the bowlers are the only batters left. And he just attacked them right from the get-go, and he said to Cronje, I'm taking you down today. And to see him, I didn't know what he was saying because I was just watching it on television, but I've since found out that he said, I'm taking you down today. And of course it was the famous you dropped the World Cup apocryphal line. But it was, I just saw him chatting to Cronje, and he was that aggressive Steve Waugh alpha stance. And I was thinking, I think he's sledging Cronje. And it was unusual for me to see a batter sledge a bowler in those days, Normally they'll chat back, but for Waugh to be the aggressor in that situation was quite profound.
Yeah, most certainly. I love that inning so much, that 120 not out. And Steve Waugh, it's not just, you sort of, interesting, when I interviewed him, I wanted to sort of find out where his broader view came from, because 80s, 90s Australia was fairly insular, but he wasn't. He was one that wanted to sort of break out of the norm and, take in foreign countries and actually write his own book. And I think, I'm sure maybe it's the same for you. Me growing up, I learnt a lot from him, not as a cricketer, but those things, that sort of curiosity that he had that actually seemed different to most of the cricketers that at the time.
You see that, one reads about War and his mate Gavin Robertson in the previous tour. I think it was
Pakistan 98. Pakistan
98. And then what was the previous tour of India? But anyway, Pakistan 98, and then it was and them kind of going out, breaking curfew at the hotel and going out and getting a tour guide to show them around and everything. And it turns out, that I've heard with interviews with Robertson that in many ways he was the instigator, that he kind of was the one that opened Steve War's mind to that. And Steve War actually said at one stage, I don't know. And Gavin Robertson said, if we're not doing this, why are we here? Let's go and find out about this culture. And Steve War actually says in his book, Out of My Comfort Zone, that Robertson's his soulmate. And so, interesting, those two guys doing that at the time. And of course, if anything is going to open your mind in life, it's India or Pakistan. And that story that Robertson tells of them getting in a lift and being lowered right down into like way below the earth surface, and seeing an albino colony, because in the subcontinent albinos are considered bad luck, and so they all have to be out of view. And so now that's something, right? To get in a lift to go underground and see an albino colony, and you're just two boys from
absolutely.
From, suburban Sydney,
I had Robbo in here a couple of weeks ago. I actually turned out, just by chance, I interviewed Gavin Robertson one week and then Steve Waugh the next week. And
oh, wow.
We had this beautiful, me and Robbo had this amazing, like 1.5 hour interview. I lost track of time and I came out of it and I said to the producer, I said, that was just the most amazing interview. And, if you go back actually on this feed, you'll see Gavin Robertson and Steve Waugh, and have a listen. But I think there is certainly Robbo pushed Waugh a little bit. There was that one tour, I think Pakistan, where they were told not to go out, and he just said, "Let's go."
Yeah.
Also, I asked Waugh about that, and he said one of the things about getting out was also relieving the pressure. That if you were in your hotel room all the time, you were just thinking about cricket all the time, and getting out and taking your mind off it sort of was a way of relieving stress. So, yeah, brilliant stuff.
Yeah, I mean, what an interesting duo those two were, and what pioneers. And, with Waugh, there's so many of his innovations, from Gallipoli to handing out the cap. I mean, how many to the debutante? I mean, how many sports across the world now do that? That was Waugh's idea.
Absolutely. He's a genius.
And also, it's a funny thing, as Damien Fleming says about him, yes, he's altruistic, but he's also he's a natural marketer. He's like, his marketing brain is off the charts. He knows how to actually, and he uses that marketing brain for good. So no, I won't hear a bad word about S. Waugh.
He's got a good agent, a good manager, and it took me 5 years to get him on the show. It's a lesson in persistence. One thing my mum always taught me as a kid was persist, and every year for 5 years I put in a request for Waugh, and this year happened to work out that he's got an exhibition in Sydney. So, this podcast fits well. So, he didn't disappoint.
Oh,
wonderful guy.
Yeah, that's good that your mum taught you that. It's good that your mum taught you that, because it's tough, getting guests on the show. And if they say no once, or you get ignored once, then it's easy to get down about it. I've got a podcast as well, and it's
12. What is it called? 12 questions. We should plug it. What is it called?
It's 10 questions. 10 questions with Adam Zwar.
12 summers, 10 questions. Lots of numbers.
Yeah. Got to have numbers in the title.
But it's a great show. 10 questions. You ask what a sort of standard formula of questions.
Yeah, it's kind of loosely based on the Proust questionnaire, and which Proust in those days had this. I think it was 40 questions or something that you asked someone all these questions, and you actually get the full breadth of their personality. I'm only using 10 because I haven't got all day, but I find it works as a podcast because you get a decent biography, and people aren't freaked out. Some of the celebrities who are scared of the questions that you might ask them. Well, they know what questions they're going to be asked, so it actually makes them comfortable.
Yeah, I love the format, and what's interesting with that format is it's not just the questions, but it's also how the guest interacts with the questions and the format. It's
true.
really
Yeah,
interesting. So great stuff.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Yeah, we had my first cricketer on there was SCG McGill many moons ago. And
that's actually that's how in this funny bloody world how he was on Cricket Unfiltered, because you had him on your show, then he was a big fan of our friend Pat Bramall, and then I reached out to McGilla and said, look, I'm a mate of Pat's, why don't you come on my podcast? And he said, no problem. And then I submitted that episode to the Australian Podcast Awards, which was then nominated for an award in the finals, and then got archived in the National Film and Sound Archive. So there's an interview in the archive of me and McGill that started with your interview with him.
Oh, mate, that's brilliant. No, I'm glad to hear that, because he, I found him such a generous interviewee, and I know he's got troubles now, but he's always seeking, to better himself, and he was always taking account for for his the difficulties in his life, but it was also so positive about Warnie, and even though for me there are occasions, and I say this in the book, that particularly I think it was the fourth test or fifth test in 2005 that I remember thinking, well, the test they took Sean Tate in, I remember thinking McGill should have played that test, but I got a funny feeling that it was very clear by that stage that Warnie didn't want a second leg spinner.
Yeah, that's the feeling I got as well. That fifth test of the Oval, McGill really wanted to play when they needed to win.
Yeah, and it was a Turner, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, history could be different.
Yeah.
English cricket could be dead now. Well, Adam, congratulations on 12 Summers. It's a great book. Go out, if you're listening or watching, go out and buy it. You won't be disappointed. There's ups and downs, personal and on the cricket field. I could talk about it with you forever. But thanks for coming on the podcast. I hope the book does great. And you'll be hammering it all summer.
I will be. I'm so glad I'm on after Gavin Robertson and Zwar. I mean, what a privilege to follow those two.
Yep. Well,
what happens when you know Menace.
That's it. Great stuff. Look, Adam, take care.
Thanks,
have a great summer. I hope. Well, just while I've got you, as a cricket fan, where are you thinking on the Ashes are going to go? What's your feeling? Do you like Carey as the keeper? Give me some Zwarisms.
I really like Carey. It's very interesting because in the test, the Amazon documentary, how he never spoke. It was hardly like he's obviously kind of a careful person. Yeah, I like him. I think he's great, and he seems to have something about him that says leadership. And I think I just can't see. I can't pick a winner at the moment between England and Australia. I think can't wait to see Jimmy Anderson in Adelaide with the pink ball. Woohoo!
Yeah, right. Can't pick a winner. You're a bit like me. I think it's going to be a lot closer than people are talking about.
Yeah.
And I do not like the idea of a fifth test under lights. I think, why do we want Anderson with a pink ball twice, Adam? Twice.
No. I'm not happy for once. I want to see it one night. I want to see it and then never see it again.
I agree. All right, Adam. Well, thanks for joining us on Cricket Unfiltered.
Thanks, Manners.
Adam Zwar, author of 12 Summers, writer, comedian, host of 10 Questions. All the best.